Hello, this is Ron Malone. I'm the judge for the Faces and Figures Art Show, currently at the Old Hyde Park Art Center, and sponsored by the Tampa Regional Artist. Uh, it's a real pleasure to be invited to judge a great show like this and be a part of TRA. TRA, you're really doing some cool things, and thank you. Let me start off a little bit with the criteria that I use for judging. I use four. One is presentation, two is technical, three is composition, and four is wow factor. Let me provide some observations about the criteria and explain a little bit more what I'm talking about in this show. I'd like to offer some good things about it and also maybe some areas that if someone were wanting to improve, might want to consider. The first is presentation, and presentation is really how the piece is presented. It's the matting, the frame, the stand. It's everything that basically puts the piece in view, and that's called presentation. The good news is that the frames were pretty appropriate, and the mats, generally speaking, for all the two-dimensional pieces, were really very appropriate and good. The area for improvement, I think, is probably the big one is the blemishes on the mats, and the mats, some of them were miscut or overcut. Um, that's attention to detail that will set you apart from a winner, and you can have a beautiful piece, but as a judge looks at it, it can be distracting. And when you're competing against people who have perfect mats and don't have blemishes on them or other problems, it's hard to get up there in the winner's circle. Some of the frames I think were distracting. The frames were miscut or overcut or damaged or something. Edges weren't right, or the mitering was off. There's one that was a plastic frame, and I think there were two of them I saw that were just that were ornate, and being that ornate were, I think, pretty distracting to the piece. Which, by the way, the piece was really well done. Also, be careful of getting the right frame size and the mat together. Some of the mats, it looked like maybe you had a frame that you wanted to make work, and so the mat was cut so that you could use that frame. Again, when you're competing, that's a detail that's going to set you apart and not move you to the winner's circle. So on the technical side, technical is the knowledge and the execution of the skills you have for the medium. If you know the methods, you know how to use the paint or the pastel or the graphite, whatever that is, technically, do you know how to use it and make it work for you? I'd say most displayed a high degree of technical competence. There were just a few issues here and there that I thought on the technical side probably could use a little more work and maybe a little more practice or classes, or et cetera. So let's take a look at the big one. This overall was probably the culprit for most people that could have been in the winner's circle or could have competed better, was around the composition. Composition is really how shapes, values, and color, how these are all orchestrated to create a story or something for the viewer. They're all part of something put together, and they should say something or be something, or somehow there's a reason why you're painting it. So the good is that most were highly creative and had a story. Most of them were, I consider, pretty interesting, uh, and some, created or the values were dead on, good range, and some good basic composition design. However, I think room for improvement are some had way too many shapes, and they were competing for the attention of the painting. And faces or figures in the middle of the piece looking at you um, doesn't. It's hard for it to really say anything. It's sometimes when you have somebody you're painting, you may know that person, and for you, it's that's you got a story behind it. But in an art show, people don't know that person. They're not going to have the same reaction. So it's really based on the art, not on the person and the composition. Uh, some used, I consider, more of a traditional portrait, even a very traditional photo portrait. There are a couple I thought you probably might be better off just having a photograph because it didn't tell anything more than just you painting a portrait, which is okay, but in a show like this that's competitive, that's really tough. Um, I think the other is I think you may have been controlled by the reference photo a little bit too much and maybe added elements to the photo or painted it exactly like maybe the photograph. So it didn't give you any composition creativity opportunities. The other one is what I call the cute child syndrome. it's uh, it's where I'm a granddad to some really cute kids, and I have a couple really cute pictures, and it's kind of like that is really a cute picture. Wouldn't it make a nice painting? And yes, it would, and yes, I do paint it, but it belongs in my house. It just won't be something that would compete in a art show. So it kind of boils down to in composition, you have to know why you are putting it in the show. If you're painting for a show, composition is really key. If you're painting for home, then the composition is more of a representation of a person that you want to really, know and remember. The fourth one is a big one. It's kind of the combination of all the above. It really answers the question why you created this piece and what is it that you want the viewer to react to? What is it? You want an emotion? It's something, if you're walking through your show, what made you stop and look at that? There's something about it. At first you don't know, and then as you study it, that's called the wow factor. It's like, wow, what happened here? What's going on? And the good is there's a number of pieces, and those pieces won awards, the ones that really had the wow factor. And they made the viewer stop and look. Some really, I have to say, created an emotional reaction. Now, it didn't make me cry or anything, but there was something that said, there's something connected to this. Now, the areas for improvement, generally speaking, is that some of the subject matter was trite, overdone. If you Google a topic and you see 3 million paintings just like it, then you know it might be a little trite. The backgrounds on some were, you could tell, an afterthought. You weren't really sure what to do with your background. And as a result, the background either was distracting or it really didn't do anything to support the subject. I call this little problem we sometimes have, I call it creating versus making. There's a big difference of sitting down and making a painting one, just to make one. But it's totally different when you are creating. You're planning generally with creating. You're in a mode of creating. It's not. It's like it's a big difference. It's the result that comes out of it is much different. And it's very hard when you're just focusing on making something to produce something that's going to win awards. So let's talk about the first one that received honorable mention, and that's done by David Fitzgerald. It is a delightful composition entitled A.J. Ferris, Illinois Cavalry. This must be A.J. the Colonel. But anyway, if you look at this painting, it begins to unfold of a story, and the values and the colors are just extraordinary. The golds and yellows are often used in religious paintings like this with the contrast to really give respect or create a mood that idealizes or honors a person. The contrast between that gold and blue does create an emotional response anytime you use these complements or near complements together. That dark blue is pretty close to the complement of that gold. All shapes and colors really lead you to the person's face. So a great job, well done, and congratulations, David. The second honorable mention goes to Chris Van Hilo. I hope I pronounced that name right, Chris. It's called Beethoven Meets Johnny Depp. This glass mosaic piece is technically superb and composition rich. Chris used a faded music sheet for the background to help tell the story of Western music composer. And this composer, if you know the background, had very limited social skills, and he was kind of known as a difficult person. And as we found out later, the why he was that way is he went deaf, and he was trying to keep people from knowing that he had gone deaf. So this is really a beautiful piece. I love the way you cut. That's a lot of technical work. I like that little red spot in the top right of his forehead to use for the darkening of the skin. And so this is just a superb piece. The only comment I'll make is I don't like the use of Johnny Depp in the title. The only reason I don't like it, I think it cheapens it. But anyway, because it's just a piece that really captures I think, a moment of history. The next honorable mention goes to Patty Kilber. This is really a piece about light telling the story of an early morning stroll with the dogs. Thus, it's titled Morning Walk. It's really well planned out, and the way you kept your whites for the contrasting light source is just beautiful. That little light on the head and the shoulders, just enough to know it's there. Not too much detail, but just enough detail to tell the story. Also, the white on white mat and frame supports this piece really well. So, Patty, this was really nicely done. The next honorable mention goes to Herman Wilberg. And Herman, this really is an excellent example of painting a child with a story. There are a lot of people who paint kids or grandkids, and I'm one of them. And they can be really quite boring and should not be in art shows, probably. I don't enter them. But anyway, this piece really creates a tension with the boy standing on and against a boulder. He's looking down as if possibly he could fall. And thus the title is Long Way Down. The color and the shapes really help tell the story. So Herman, this was really a nicely done pastel. Let's get to third place, and that goes to a master of oils. Don't know Matt, would love to meet him. The blending and the color mixing is superb. Matt Elrod really does a nice job with creating a story. It's a conflict of a lady who is looking off to her right, and we all look that way, and then the lines bring us back down to the hand and to the figure. If you notice those lines, well done as far as composition. Technical skills are off the map, unbelievable, to a point of perfection. So this piece, Matt, is just a superb, very, very, very nice. The only one thing I would suggest is I'd like to see this in some other framing options. This conjures up, I'm not sure what you're conjuring up, but the gold ornate kind of suggests this goes back more toward the golden age. But anyway, Matt, nicely done. Wow. Second place goes to Kathy Durden. This really is a value study with a colorful story. It's of Boston. If you've ever been to Boston, I can visualize this in quite a few of the downtown streets and locations. Kathy did a beautiful job of orchestrating colors and execution of the techniques. And the values are really the standout on this piece. The lighted columns and steps and those shadows, even the rail and the bicycle lines steer the viewer's eyes to the musician. And even the musician has beautiful lines and values, and the light that hits him is just superb. Kathy, this may have been one of those once-in-a-lifetime photographs where all the composition elements played out perfectly, or nearly perfect. At least for me, if I'd taken this, I'd say this ranks up there at the top. There's only one thing I was kind of pondering looking at this, I'd like to, just curious about, is the green column, or that little area that's green there right in the middle. Green is always tough to pull off. In some ways, it detracted me just a little bit. But anyway, this is a outstanding piece. Anyone who's studying values and composition should take a closer look to this one. And let's get to number one. And number one is done by Martha Gibson, and it's entitled Opening. When I walked through the entire collection Monday, this piece stopped me in my tracks. The composition really stirs up emotion. The offset figure standing between a dark space and a light space, and that light space has some color to it. It just stops me and makes me want to look. It's loose, and it probably was done quickly. This might be a point where I might say, you don't always get a great piece of work by how long you work on it. I don't know, maybe this took hours, it could have been minutes, but it's loose. I like the dark matte you put on here and the mahogany frame. They give really great support to the piece. So Martha, congratulations, great job, well done. So thank you for allowing me to judge, and I look forward to hearing you if you would like any comments about your piece. I did make some notes on a number of them, and thank you again. This is a truly an excellent show, and I hope many of the people in this region have a chance to stop by and take a look.